So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking a lot about Hammer movies in recent months, but due to popular demand, we're going to do something on the granddaddy of Hammer, the one that started it all. It's known in Canada as Dracula, but known throughout the world as Horror of Dracula. Of course, it's the 1958 Hammer movie Dracula. Now, this gothic horror film was directed by the great Terence Fisher and written by Jimmy Sangster, based primarily on Bram Stoker's 1897 novel of the same name. This is the first in a series of Hammer horror films starring Christopher Lee as Count Dracula. The film also features Peter Cushing as Dr. Van Helsing, along with the great Michael Gough, Melissa Stribling, Carol Marsh, and John Van Eysen. In the States, the film again was retitled Horror of Dracula to avoid confusion with the U.S. original by Universal, 1931's Dracula. Beautiful color print, one of the first major Dracula movies or horror movies to be shown in color, and set the bar for the future horror genre of the 1960s. Although Psycho was just as influential on the psychological horror, this movie opened the floodgates for all kind of what they call duplicates. Cinematography by the great Jack Asher, edited by Bill Lenny, music by the incomparable James Bernard, color process again, Technicolor Glory. Production company was Hammer, distributed by Rank in the UK and Universal International. Came out 7th of May in Milwaukee and the 21st of May in London. Running time a very swift 82 minutes. Filmed on a budget of only £81,000. Made $3.5 million internationally in the box office, but much more in syndication in all kind of sundries, including VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, streaming. Anyway, production on this movie began on 17 November 1957 with an investment just of £81,000. As Count Dracula, Lee fixed the image of the fanged vampire in popular culture. Christopher Frayling writes, Dracula introduced fangs, red contact lenses, decollage, ready prepared wooden stakes, and in a celebrated credit sequence, blood being spattered from off-screen over the Count's coffin. Lee also introduced a dark, brooding sexuality to the character, with Tim Stanley stated Lee's sensuality was subversive and that it hinted that women might quite like having their neck chewed on by a stud. Now, in 2017, a poll of 150 actors, directors, writers, producers, and critics for Time Out saw Dracula ranked the 65th best British film ever. Empire magazine ranked Lee's portrayal as Count Dracula the 7th greatest horror movie character of all time, and that should have been much, much, much higher. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why this movie works, it's the plot. In 1885, Jonathan Harker arrives at Count Dracula's castle near Klausenberg to take up his post as librarian. Inside, he is startled by a young woman who claims to be a prisoner and begs for his help. Dracula arrives, greets Harker, and guides him to his room. Alone, Jonathan writes in his diary, revealing his true intentions. He is a vampire hunter and has come to flush out Dracula. Good luck with that. Now, sometime later, Harker again is confronted by the woman. She reveals herself to be a bloodsucker and bites at his neck. Dracula arrives and pulls her away as Harker passes out. After awakening in a room in daylight, Harker discovers the bite marks on his neck. He realizes he has lost nearly the entire period of daylight. Harker writes a final entry in his journal and hides the book outside the castle. He descends into a crypt to find Dracula and the vampire woman resting in their coffins. Harker first stakes the woman, who withers to old age and dies. He then turns to Dracula's coffin and finds it empty. Dracula, awakened and heavily angry, closes the door to the crypt, trapping Harker. Now, days pass, and Van Helsing arrives in Klausenberg looking for Harker. An innkeeper's daughter gives him Harker's journal. He travels to Dracula's castle and finds it deserted, but comes across the portrait that Harker had of his fiancée, Lucy, with the photos now gone. He finds Harker in Dracula's coffin in the crypt, transformed into a bloodsucker. Van Helsing stakes him before leaving for the town of Karlstadt and delivering the news of Harker's death to Arthur Holmwood and his wife Mina, brother and sister-in-law of Lucy, who was ill. When night falls, Lucy opens the doors to her terrace and lays bare her neck. Very effective scene. Already, it bears the mark of a vampire bite. Dracula then arrives to bite her again. So why this is extremely effective in the opening scenes is because there's a movement of Lee and Van Helsing, good versus evil, that really works, especially in the high color process. Now, when Mina seeks out Van Helsing's aid in treating Lucy, who begs the maid Gerda to room or prescribe garlic bouquets and is found dead the next day, Van Helsing turns over Harker's journal to Arthur. 3 days after her burial, an undead Lucy lures Gerda's daughter Tanya to a graveyard, where Arthur has found Lucy's tomb empty. Van Helsing appears and wards Lucy off with a cross. He explains to Arthur that Lucy was targeted to replace the woman Harker killed. Van Helsing suggests using her to lead them to Dracula, but Arthur refuses, and Van Helsing stakes her in her coffin. Arthur takes one final look at Lucy's body and sees her at peace. Now, when Van Helsing and Arthur travel to the border crossing at Ingolstadt to track down Dracula's coffin, Mina receives a message, supposedly from Arthur, telling her to go to Karlstadt, where Dracula waits. The next day, Arthur and Van Helsing visit the Undertaker, but find Dracula's coffin missing. Later, Arthur tries to give Mina a cross to wear, which burns her, revealing that she's turning into a vampire herself. During the night, Dracula appears inside the house and bites her. Arthur agrees to give her a blood transfusion administered by Van Helsing. When Arthur asks Gerda to fetch some wine, she tells her Mina forbade her to go down to the cellar. Upon hearing this, Van Helsing bolts downstairs and finds Dracula's coffin, which is empty. Dracula's escaped with Mina, intent on making her his new vampire bride. A very, very dramatic chase ensues as Dracula rushes to return to his castle before sunrise. He attempts to bury Mina alive outside the crypt, but is interrupted by Van Helsing and Arthur. Pursuing Dracula inside the castle, Van Helsing struggles with the vampire before eventually tearing down the curtains to let in the starlight. Van Helsing forms a cross with 2 candlesticks, driving Dracula into the sun's rays, and he crumbles to dust as Van Helsing looks on. Mina recovers, and the cross-shaped scar fades from her hand while Dracula's ashes blow away in the morning breeze, leaving only his clear clothes and the ring behind. Of course, leaves it open for a sequel. Now, the Michael Gough character, or who Michael Gough plays, Arthur, it's quite strong. But like I said, John Van Eysen as Jonathan Harker is quite good as well. Now, as Christopher Lee remarked in an interview with Leonard Woolf's A Dream of Dracula, I was always against the whole Ty and Tales rendition. Surely it's the height of the ridiculous for a vampire to step out of the shadows wearing white tie, tails, patent leather shoes, and a full cloak. Lee said he never watched any of the performances of Dracula until well after making his films, and that when he got the first Dracula role with little time to prepare, he had to hurry off to read the book and play it fresh, with no knowledge of the previous performances. In the same interview, Lee said the following about Dracula. He had also have the erotic element about him, and not because he sank his teeth into a woman. It's a mysterious matter, and it's something to do with the physical appeal of the person who is draining her life. It's like being a sexual blood donor. Women are attracted to men for any hundreds of reasons. One of them is the response to the demand to give oneself, and what greater evidence is giving is there that your blood flowing literally from your own bloodstream. It's a complete abandonment of women to the power of a man. Now, Lee discovered something in the character that hasn't been done before, and also because I had read the book and I perhaps discovered something in the character which other people hadn't or had not noticed or hadn't decided to present, and that is that the character is heroic, erotic, and romantic. There was also a tragedy to Dracula, he said. Lee also felt that authenticity of Stoker's novel was important and was frustrated with his Hammer Dracula films. The stories I had given them to me have had almost no relation to the book, which is my reiterated complaint. My one great regret has always been that I had never been able to present the account exactly as Bram Stoker described him in every way. It was also due to poor scripts and a lack of imagination on the part of people who never seemed to understand the full potential of the story. Now, when Hammer asked for an adaptation of Stoker's novel, screenwriter Sangster decided to streamline it to fit into less than 90 minutes of screen time and shooting it on a very low budget within the confines of Bray Studios and the surrounding estate. Working on these limitations, Sangster posted that Harker travels to Dracula's castle intending to destroy Dracula, not to complete a real estate transaction as in a novel, and gets killed, and made Arthur Holmwood into Mina's husband and Lucy into Harker's fiancée and Arthur's sister. Now, what was nice about this was they kept certain aspects of the Stoker novel. One is the fact that Dracula has the ability to transform. into a wolf batter mist was dropped for the sake of realism, according to Sangster. However, it was done in other movies. I thought the idea of being able to change into a bat or wolf or anything like that made the film seem more like a fairy tale than it needed to be. I tried to ground the script to some extent to reality, which of course hurt it at the box office. Now, Fisher believed my greatest contribution to Dracula myth was to bring out the underlying sexual element in the story. He, Dracula, is basically sexual. At the moment he bites is the combination of a sexual experience. According to Fisher, Dracula preyed upon the sexual frustrations of his women victims. The Homewood marriage was one in which Mina was not sexually satisfied, and that was her weakness as far as Dracula's approach to her was concerned. Now, according to producer Anthony Hines, when it came to casting Dracula, it never occurred to any of us anyone else but Christopher Lee. For his role of horror Dracula, Lee earned, get this, £750, which was 1,200 Canadian at the time, which would be 4,000 now. Speaking of filming and doing his take on the character, Lee recalled that he tried to make the character all that he was in the book: heroic, romantic, erotic, fascinating, and dynamic. Now, shooting again began in November, Remembrance Day 57. Principal photography ended some 7 weeks later on Christmas Eve. Special effects work continued with the film wrapping on the 3rd of January 58. Now, the filming of Dracula's destruction included a shot in which Dracula appears to peel away his decaying skin. This was accomplished by putting a layer of red makeup on Lee's face and then covering his entire face with a thin coating of mortician's wax, which was then made up to conform to his normal skin tone. When he raked his fingers across the wax, it revealed the raw marks underneath. The startling sequence was cut out, but was stored for the 2012 re-release on Blu-ray using footage from a badly damaged Japanese print. Now, at the end of the film, Dracula destroyed on an inlaid zodiac wheel on the floor, which was several quotes in Latin and Greek. The inner circle in Greek has a quote from Homer's Odyssey book: "The mind of men who live on earth, and such as the day of the Father of gods and men, Zeus brings upon them." The outer wheel is written in Latin, and it's quoted from Hesiod vi Bartholomew Enrico, de Preparatus Rerum. Tellus vero primum sicum geniu et parum, sibi colium silis orientum, ut absum totum abtac, ut esset vitas dis sedis tuta semper. And earth first bore starry heaven, equal to herself, to cover on her on every side, and to the ever sure abiding place for the blessed gods. Now, Dracula's ring is left on a glyph and the sign of Aquarius on the zodiac wheel, so you know it's going to come back for a sequel. Now, the film received, again, its world premiere in Milwaukee, and it was played as a double feature with Universal film The Thing That Couldn't Die. The film opened at the Gaumont Haymarket in London on the 21st of May, 1958. Now, Dracula was well received by critics and fans of Stoker's work. The trade journal reviews of 58 were very positive, noting the Bernard score being sinister, that Hines provides great backgrounds. Now, Harrison's reports was particularly enthusiastic. Of all the Dracula horror pictures thus far produced, this one, made in Britain and photographed in Technicolor, tops them all. Now, the film has an approval rating of 90% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 40 reviews, with an average rating of 7.75 out of 10. The website's critical consensus states, trading gore for grandeur, Horror of a Dracula makes an impressive turn for an invertebrate Christopher Lee as a titular vampire and a typical Hammer mood that makes aristocracy quite sexy. Now, the film, again, $3.5 million in theatrical rentals worldwide alone, had a record 10-day run in Milwaukee in its premiere engagement, and it was one of the 12 most popular films at the Brit box office in 1958. It earned domestic rentals in North America of $1 million. Now, as it stands right now, it's probably one of the most followed in home media. Now, as of 2023, it's available in various formats. Made its first appearance on DVD in 2002 in a U.S. standalone disc, and was later released in 2007 in a film pack along with Dracula's Risen from the Grave, Taste the Blood of Dracula, and Dracula AD 72, which was part of Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema's 4 film favorites line of DVDs. In 2010, Turner Classic Movies released the film in a 4-pack along with Dracula's Risen from the Grave, The Curse of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. The film was released on DVD in the UK in 2002, along with The Curse of Frankenstein and the Mummy, and a box set entitled Hammer Horror Originals. The film was digitally restored and re-released in the UK by the British Film Institute in 2017. When the film was originally released in the UK, the British Board of Review gave it an X, being cut, while the 2007 uncut release was giving a 12A. For many years, historians pointed to the fact that an even longer, more explicit version of the film played in Japanese and European cinemas in 1958. Efforts to locate the legendary Japanese version of Dracula had been fruitless. Now, in September 2011, Hammer announced that part of the Japanese release had been found by writer and cartoonist Simon Rosen in the National Film Center at the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. The first 5 reels of the film held by the center were destroyed in the fire in 1984, but the last 4 reels were recovered. The recovered reels include the last 36 minutes of film and includes 2 extended scenes, one of which is the discovery of a nearly complete version of the film's iconic disintegration scene. Some experts rightly note that there is still footage missing for the disintegration scene, as evidenced by stills and the memories of those who had seen the sequence decades before. The announcement mentioned a HD Telecity transfer of all 4 reels with a view for a future UK release. Now, on 29 December 2012, Hammer announced that the restored film would release on a 3-disc double-play Blu-ray disc set to UK on 18 March 2013. The release contains the BFI restoration, along with the 2012 high-def Hammer restoration, which includes footage which was previously believed to be lost. The set contains both Blu-ray discs and DVD copies of the film, as well as numerous bonus documentaries covering the film's production, censorship, and restoration process. A future digital restoration was done by the current domestic rights holder Warner Brothers in association with BFI for release in 2018 on DVD and Blu-ray by the Warner Archive Collection. The version is different from 2002 and 07, as the original Universal International name and logo are restored, and the opening credits bear the original Dracula title rather than Horror of Dracula. It also does not contain any additional footage that Hammer previously restored, similar to what Lucas did with Star Wars. Now, there's been numerous sequels to it, including The Brides of Dracula in 1960, Dracula, Prince of Darkness in 1966, Dracula's Risen from the Grave in 1968, Taste the Blood of Dracula in 1970, Scars of Dracula in 1970, Dracula AD in 1972, The Satanic Rites of Dracula in 1973, and The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Now, the comic book adaptation came out in 1976 in House of Hammer 1, and if you want to find out more about the Hammer movies, check our podcast here. Now, I saw it originally on TV, cut unfortunately. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 4. But the scenes were cut, and I saw them later on. That's why I give it 4 out of 4. You have no modern colored horror, because most of the horror was black and white. And Hammer hit it out of the park. Imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. Paying your lead actor £750. I wouldn't buy even a car back then. In England, maybe a second-hand car. And you make $3 million at the box office. Christopher Lee is owed a lot of money by... People should pass the hat with all the horror producers through the years that Lee made it work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a top 40 movie of all time. Not because it's the best horror movie ever, but what it did. It's just like Psycho, just like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. A lot of the key female movies of the 30s and 40s. There would be no horror genre like there is in 2023 were it not for a Technicolor, bloodshot Dracula like Christopher Lee getting the women horny both on and off the screen. Because when he sucked you, you knew it. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing with our Hammer podcast, this is a big one, only 20 minutes. Let us know what a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, if someone's knocking your window 4 o'clock in the morning, make sure you don't have fangs. Please and thank you. Have a good one. Bye.